Perfect, you guys. So we're gonna do some more journaling later and everything, but that just kind of starts getting you thinking and starts shifting your mindset a little bit, because I don't think we ever even take the time to think about wellness practices. We just get up, we run our day, and it's like, wow, of course I'm not nourishing myself. Oh, of course my blood pressure's a little high. Of course I'm running on cortisol. Of course my sleep's not great, because we've not actually done anything purposeful or thoughtful, or we haven't planned to create the life we want. And the life we want is this life of wellness. So if we want it, we can't just run life thinking it's just going to happen. We need to purposely create what we really desire to be. And it's simpler than we think. So Heidi's going to really go over some of the like functional medicine topics, and then really looking at like why metabolically, our stress from our microbiome to the gut brain axis. We'll talk more about brain this afternoon, but many of us women, all these same things have happened, right? Autoimmune, cancers, gaining weight, not being able to lose weight, stressors, but it's because we're just missing these basic components of how the body works. And I think if we just back up and realize what the body needs, it's like, whoa, all these things can happen. But unfortunately, the world we live in, we hear, we see what's the next shiny thing. And this is just going to be my answer. This is going to be, we kind of know it's not, but we want it to, because life is just fast and busy, right? So we hope it might be the thing. So hopefully with this background, it'll give us a deeper understanding to go, oh, this never needed to be so complicated. And now I see. So without further ado, Heidi, take it away.
So most of you sound like you're very familiar with functional medicine, but oftentimes people have a mild understanding of what it is and the processes of how that happens, right? You see a functional medicine practitioner, oftentimes it's not that much different than seeing a regular doctor, except they don't pull out their prescription pad. They actually ask you questions about what you're eating, how you're exercising, because all of these things matter. And functional medicine is really root cause medicine. Like every action, every thought, every metabolic movement, chemical reaction in our body is preceded by something else. And then after that, you have a down trickle effect. So the whole idea of functional medicine is to go as far upstream as you can, correct that, and everything else downstream will correct itself most of the time. Because we are brilliantly designed. So much of these functions in our body are automatic. If we had to think about breathing, we'd all be dead. Right? If we all had to think about half the processes that go on in our body, we would not survive as a species. So to tap into these already pre-planned systems in our body and encourage those to function better optimally is really what functional medicine is about. Because what happens is we can all have the same symptoms, different causes, different outcomes. But I have the same symptoms she is, but I have this as the outcome. And that's the thing with genetics. Love that we know so much about genetics and that we can bring that into our functional medicine practice, because the genetics help us determine what's going to show up when these symptoms start happening over and over and over or get worse. There's some pathways where it can show up, and this is where the genes come in very handy. Learning about that. So what I do in my practice is I go, and most of you will probably experience with if you go see a functional medicine practitioner is I have a basquillion questionnaires because I think there is 12, 14 questionnaires. But I ask you questions from stem to stern. Brain health, brain function as far as brain regions, as well as brain health, right? How is it manifesting for you? We go through all the systems of the body, and we do it in the hierarchy of how the body works. So we can really target in on, wait a minute, what's going on here? Where this cog is not rolling. What's gunking it up? What's getting in the way? And we can start at that. It can really help us pinpoint starting points and just how far it's trickled down to the rest of it. So you'll see, this is my business, The Science of Thriving. Because that's what I like. I love science and I love thriving. So I thought I'd throw them together. So this is my metabolic assessment form. This is just one of the forms that I use. And really it helps us say, you know, what is my body saying? What is it trying to tell me? And once we learn the language of our own body, which we've been taught in this society, is let someone else deal with it. Go to your doctor. Look for something outside yourself for the answer. But the answer is in you. It's intrinsic. It's inside of us. And we just have to learn how to evaluate the language the body's trying to tell us, these symptoms, or these aches, these pains, these mood swings. The body is is talking to us, raising that red flag or white flag. You're gonna need help here. And it's just learning that language. And I love this metabolic assessment form because it helps, even if a client comes in, they go through the whole process and they say, yeah, I think I got it on my own. I encourage them always, like, print out this metabolic assessment and fill it out every 90 days. And then compare it to the last one. What's changed? What do you have to shear up? What have you become too lax in? That kind of thing. So it's a powerful tool. We start right at the beginning. Let's start at the colon because everything starts in the gut-brain axis, correct? And so when we go through, if any of these people, I have a thing where you can hit 0 to 4, 4 being very, very often, 0 being, I don't have any of these things. But right away, we can determine, are you getting enough fiber in your diet? Are you drinking enough water? Are you drinking too much water? Right? So right away, we get a lot of answers with just a few questions. The next step that would be is the intestinal barrier. So if we're not getting enough fiber, enough water, what's happening to our gut microbiome? What's happening to our gut linings? This one is key, intestinal barrier. If we have 2s and 3s on this, or even 4s, I mean, 4s were like, there's no question, but this is the leaky gut question. This is where people have, the unpredictable swelling. I'm getting more and more sensitive to the foods. I've been eating this food my whole life, and now I have a reaction when I eat it. When we get more and more food intolerances, it's our gut lining. We have lost total tolerance, and our body has an amazing ability to tolerate a lot of junk, right? A lot of chemicals, a lot of emotional neurotransmitters flying in, catecholamines, stress response, cortisol. Our body is amazing in its ability to tolerate a lot of things. So when it starts to lose tolerance and have trouble doing that, it shows up with food. It has ways of letting us know. And food's a big one. So this is my leaky gut question. If they have this, we kind of hit the brake and say, all right, we have leaky gut here. How long has this been going on? And let's do a test to see if you have some bacteria hanging out.
Can you repair leaky gut?
Sorry?
Can you repair leaky gut?
Absolutely. Here's the truth. Again, our brilliant body. The body is amazing. Is our gut linings, all of our linings, repaired every 7 days, right? And all of our linings are the same structures. So brain lining, bladder lining, uterine lining, lung lining, they're all the same structure. So if you have leaky gut, you have leaky other things, right? So women go, leaky bladder, must be my hormones. No, you probably have leaky gut. Interesting. Yeah, you probably have leaky gut. And oftentimes we do the leaky gut protocol. Their breathing gets better, their bladder gets better, their uterine fibroids or PMS gets better. So they're all the same structures. Yeah.
Are bladder infections considered leaky gut?
They can contribute, but that's more microbiome.
Okay.
Yeah. And as we age, we lose certain ability to repopulate that microbiome, and sometimes we need a little bit of help, along with considering hormone replacement or hormone support. For sure. Yeah.
And is celiac something different than intestinal barrier issues?
Yes, celiac, great question. Celiac is, yeah, celiac is autoimmune, right? But it's very specific. So celiac is autoimmune against the gut villi in there. So you look at the gut villi, it is very much like a shag carpet. They should be up, should be ready. The food particles come in, our good bacteria hang out in between that villi. There's the barrier walls, right? Gut lining. And the food particles come in, the good probiotics in there, test it for bacteria, et cetera, et cetera. Then it's allowed to go into the cell. Then the cells get sampled, the dendrites come and sample it. They tag it, say good, bad. We don't know what that is. Let's tag it to adios out of here. Then it's allowed into the bloodstream. If it's tagged, the immune system knows what to do with it. And it sends it off. If we have leaky gut, and the food particles go around that process and just drop into the bloodstream, there's no tag. It creates a lot of havoc because the immune system says, we don't know who you are, we don't know what to do with you, how did you get in here, who invited you? And there's all this inflammatory cascade. That going on and on and on can develop autoimmune, where the body has an inability to recognize self tissue and non-self tissue. And that is celiac is very specific for that kind of thing. And we just know that gluten and a lot of different forms of grains fires that particular autoimmune up.
And can I just piggyback on there for you is, as we'll talk a little bit later this afternoon, many people just think, oh, if you have the gene, right, then you'll probably have that. And really what we'll talk about is truly through food and lifestyle is your genes can turn on and off. And so even though you have them, it doesn't need to be activated because I have the celiac gene, but you can learn through what you're doing to basically keep it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Once it turns on, once the disease is developed, can you turn them on or you can just manage?
Yeah, it's kind of controversial. I've not seen anyone get cured, 100% cured, but you can wind down.
From all autoimmune or celiac?
Autoimmune
Yeah.
and celiac. Well, all autoimmune,
Yeah.
it's all kind of in one bucket. You can really wind down the tissue destruction. But the body never really completely regains its ability to recognize self and non-self. It gets better at it, but you have to always be diligent about it.
So you mentioned the linings of the leaky gut, or the lining of the gut is very similar in structure, or if not the same structure.
Yeah.
In other organs in our system. When we start to get leaky gut, if you will, or when we're creating that kind of environment, is that an inflammatory response that the other linings of our body are responding to, or how do those get activated?
Yeah, great question. The body will contain it with gut lining for a bit, but then once those structures start to come apart, the other linings, through weird data sort of mimicry, if you will, start to become weaker and start to break up as well. It's really about how long are you allowing this leaky gut to go, because that's the start. Once that inflammatory cascade begins, then the other linings start to break apart. Yeah. So answer it.
Same kind of question, but an unchecked leaky gut will lead to something like celiac if it's not treated. That was one of my questions. And then I have heard that anybody who's gone through a trauma like what my son has leaky gut. So that's true.
That is true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Brain trauma, and Kelly can talk much more eloquently about this, but a brain trauma, within that same hour, your gut lining is gone. It's just blown apart.
Oh, I wish we knew that.
Yeah. So we have to come in and really with a lot of the TBI protocols, we have, from a functional medicine point of view, we go in and we start cleaning up the diet. We'll do some fasting and be really intentional about the food and the timing of it. To help the brain heal.
Yeah.
Because again, same structures.
Yeah.
And the information all starts here. Yeah. But prolonged leaky gut doesn't necessarily automatically go to celiac,
Okay,
but it can go to any other autoimmune.
yeah, so it's an autoimmune.
It's an
kind of trigger.
autoimmune activator.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you necessarily need the gene active to develop any of these? other things?
Celiac,
Any other immune or any, or is lifestyle that also gets you there, even when your gene is not?
yeah, you don't have to have the gene. It's really about lifestyle, but most people who become celiac do have the gene.
Okay.
And it really, when you look at gut issues, gluten, being most of the studies with the gluten and things like that, it's only about maybe 14%, 11% even, that actually are celiac,
Oh,
right? Everyone else, or most everyone else, is emotional. It's not gut. Everyone thinks, oh, if I have celiac, I'm gonna have gut pain. Yes, you absolutely will. If I have leaky gut, I'm gonna have gut pain. Not necessarily. So most of the time people will have, first, they'll feel emotional swings. They'll have a sudden increase of anxiety, they're not sure why. Heightened response of depression, they're not sure why. It's more emotional. In fact, gluten intolerance is under a medical code for neurological. It's not a gastrointestinal. Yeah.
You say that again, you just said.
Yeah, so the code, like for insurance,
Yeah.
for gluten intolerance is under neurology. It's a neurological code. It's not a gastrointestinal code because it doesn't show up as gastrointestinal. Yeah, it shows up as a rash. It shows up as mood swings. It shows up everything else but gut. Otherwise, it'd be easy to fix, right? Or anyone deter.
Yeah. Okay.
And how do you test for leaky gut? Is it like a certain test you do?
Yeah, it's a blood test.
Oh, okay.
This is great. The nails, basically, I like to call them nails, that hold the linings together, the nails, the linings are like fences, sections of fence, and they're nailed together. They're nailed together by zonulins, occludins, and actins, right? When we do a blood test and we measure an abundance amount of zonulins, occludins, or actins in your bloodstream, we know we have barrier breach. And we go because all the barrier, same structure, the same nails. So we can't really tell. We have a barrier breach, which one is it? We don't know. 90% of the time, you start with leaky gut, everything else is gonna heal. That makes sense.
And then typically it takes how long to heal a leaky gut? If you like fast or do everything you're talking about?
Typically, yeah, if you really do an elimination diet, we take away all the inflammatory foods, whether or not you've ever reacted to those foods or not, they're just intrinsically inflammatory, right? And what are we asking the body to do? We have a leaky gut. We're not really digesting, processing, and assimilating foods. So why are we asking it to do that, right? So we bring you down to just chicken, fish, veg. That's it for about.
No like juice cleanse or anything? like that?
No, those don't really work. Chicken, fish, veg, get you some glutamine, very specific probiotic, more spore-based probiotics I find work the best. Increase enzyme support, because if you have leaky gut, the signal to make enzymes to break down your food becomes shunted. So we just give you a little support to bring that back up to normal, back up to speed. And usually it's 4 to 6 weeks. I like to retest after 6 weeks. As long as the person is feeling better. But I always check in 2 weeks, like, I want people, and truly, if people go through the protocol, they'll call up and say, could this be working this fast? I mean, I feel so much better. Do I have to continue? Yeah, it should work that fast because our body wants to heal. And you give it the components to do it. It's amazing, but you have to also give it time. To not, it's if you really burned yourself, it's gonna take time to heal it. And even though it's healing and it doesn't hurt anymore, it's not getting your attention, you still probably wanna be sensitive to rubbing that against anything scraping it or reopening that one. And that's why it takes between the 4 to 6 weeks.
4% of the population has leaky gut, which
Shame.
3% more.
Yeah.
And then did you bring to do food and like check by symptoms, or how do you know how their diet is going to, because it's not sustainable, just the chicken, fish and vegetables forever.
It's amazing because that's the autoimmune diet. So if someone has autoimmune, I'm like, welcome to your new life. What we do after we take away everything, then we'll add back in food one at a time. The last thing we would ever add it back in, and part of my leaky gut test also looks at every gluten peptide marker that we can possibly measure. So that we know on the onset, how sensitive are you to gluten? Because do we even need to add that back in, right? If someone's test lights up like a Christmas tree, I'm like, gluten's not coming back in, cry now, that's it's over. But everything else, and it depends on what gluten markers light up, because there's gluten markers that have molecular mimicry to dairy. And so if those show up, then we automatically know, let's hold off on dairy. But then we'll add back in everything one at a time. That's the hard part about a leaky gut thing, is adding the food back in one at a time. You know very much, you have to do it slowly. I have people add it in like just a taste of it 3 days in a row. If they don't have a reaction on the first day, right? And any reaction is a reaction,
Yeah.
right? Second day, no, but the third day they have a reaction, we say, okay, what your body just told us is, I can tolerate this, but I can't tolerate it a lot. So yeah, you can have it once in a while, that kind of thing. If you react on the first day, it's out there. And 6 weeks later, we'll try it again. And we just go through every food group that you want to add back in. And the testing helps us to sort of stack it and be appropriate. Like, I don't think this food's gonna bother you, but, so let's add that back in, Like the nightshades, that's a big one. But if someone comes, nightshades like eggplant, tomatoes,
Can you explain that?
sure, what part?
I don't know, because I always thought tomatoes were good. I love tomatoes. I could eat tomatoes all day long, every day.
Yeah.
And then I hear that they're bad for you. Or there's something about nightshades and I don't understand what that is.
Yeah, there's, there's the whole sort of lectin, Dr. Gundry, the lectin thing, and there's a lot of truth to it, and clinically I see it. There's a thing in tomatoes called lectins, but every vegetable has a lectin. Every vegetable has a lectin, so to say I'm not eating lectins, we can't take away all our veggies, so we have to figure out. We do know some of the biggest offenders of lectin is going to be corn, spinach, tomatoes, and soy. There's molecular mimicry to gluten on a lectin, so that particular peptide, protein peptide, lights up in your test. I take away spinach, corn, and all that. They're just inflammatory. For some people, genetically, the tomatoes are inflammatory. When they say nightshades, these people they have that one specific lectin content, and so they're grouped in a nightshade category. Anyone comes in with joint pain being their major problem, nightshades are probably an issue. And oftentimes when we retest with the food, they can tolerate, and I do a test where we test for food intolerances and sensitivities, uncooked and cooked, because they change the way they present to the body when you heat them up, right? So oftentimes I'll have people that can tolerate a tomato either heated or cold, but not both. Yeah. So we just do more digging and get more specific, the more we want to add back in food. But the timing of food sensitivity tests is really important, because if you're here with leaky gut and you do a food sensitivity test, we're going to needlessly take away foods that aren't a problem. Like, you've already lost all tolerance. So your body is going to react to foods that it normally wouldn't react to, that really aren't a problem. And so you get these tests that look horrible, and you just simply can't be that sensitive to all those foods. It's just really difficult.
Well, my son, like I said, was allergic to everything.
Yeah.
even chewing gum, like everything is allergic to. But the interesting thing that people don't realize is it was environmental too.
Yes.
So trees, grass, molds, everything like that. So what happens is the histamines in your body increase.
Yep.
So then everything looks like an invader, the food, everything. So at the food clinic, Dr. Randall, who runs that, we also have a microbiome specialist. What they do is they start you first, they test all the allergens, and then they put like a slits, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it's like an oral.
Mhm.
And then you orally take things to bring down your IG1, I think it's called, or IgA. And then they bring that down so that way then when you start, and then you take like Zysol and that type of thing, to keep it down, and then you start introducing the food. So they bring down that so that way everything doesn't react.
Yeah.
But they have this piece of equipment, so we have our own blood lab now, and we run all this blood work. And Dr. Randall can pick out what proteins, which is interesting because peanut, actually, there's a protein in grasses and trees that's in a peanut.
Yes.
So that's why sometimes when your kid plays sports, like my son used to have to come home and change, to be itchy and everything, and shower right away. So what they do is they look on a chart, you're allergic to everything, here's anaphylactic, right? Milk, dairy, nuts. And these might be milder. So when you're saying with reactions, what they do is look for the commonality of proteins.
Yes.
And then once they figure out what that is, they'll take the least allergic one, start you on that on small, like 1 milligram, and then you work your way up. And then eventually you'll be able to tolerate. And then when you tolerate, like they run them through, like you eat it, so many, and then you jump on a treadmill, so it goes through your blood quick. You sit there for an hour, you wait to see. If not, then we bring in number 2 protein. And eventually, all these from the extremely high anaphylactic will start dropping all the way down to mild.
Yeah.
And then eventually they can eat all of them. And then when they pass the challenge, then you're food freedom, So I don't know if that works with the intestinal barrier. Once you fix that, could you possibly do the same thing?
And we
To get your
definitely
food
do.
back.
Once we fix the intestinal barrier, then we add back in the foods one at a time. And if we get to a point, and for some of the worst cases we often do, we'll get to a point where we're just not dialing in the diet as precisely as we'd like. And that's the best timing to do a food sensitivity test. And, this may be a good time, but because I'm speaking to doctors, you all know, but a lot of people don't know the difference between immunoglobulins, right? So immunoglobulin A, IgA, is going to be the lining. So when that is acute, we know there's something going on right now that you're ingesting all the time, and it's destroying your soft tissues, right? Because that's where that one hangs out. The IgG is more systemic. So we get the histamine overload, things like that. The IgE is straight up allergy. So if that goes up, but what's interesting is that if you have lining barrier issues over time, and immunoglobulin A has been acute, and now it's just cannot repopulate itself and get strong, and it gets weak and weak, the IgE is going to come up. And it tries to take over where the IgA. So are we necessarily dealing with more and more allergies or a compensatory mechanism from the immune system? Yeah. And then
I think you should actually.
So yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's and what I have found actually is, especially with kids, is just doing around colostrum. Turns back on their immune system, because that's the messenger when we're born. Right? And we thought like, oh, that was it, right? But oftentimes a child has dealt with a lot of illness and sickness and trauma. That mechanism in the immune system to really support immunoglobulin function and efficiency has been shunted. So around a colostrum.
Heidi, can I ask a quick question?
Turn that back on.
Yeah, Maureen, go ahead. Question.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Do you expect to see IgA to see IgA lower or low?
Maureen, see if you can repeat that, because you, right at that moment, you cut out pretty good.
Okay, on IgA, with regard to food sensitivity, do we expect to see IgA elevated or low?
Lower. Yeah, because the lower, the more chronic it is.
Yeah, that is,
And the lower it will be. If it's acute, if it's high, we know there's something right now that they're ingesting on a daily basis that we need to get out. And that the
and
result,
if it's chronically low or non-existent.
If it's chronically low or non-existent.
yes, we have a problem because most likely your IgE will become the compensatory mechanism to balance that. And then you're gonna be more and more sensitive to histamine, which histamine's a neurotransmitter. It causes anxiety. We have to, so that has its down trickle effect.
Yeah, that is interesting because through this whole post-COVID dynamic I've gone through, even through elimination, but unfortunately now my IgE is testing less than 10. It's not even testing with any level at all now. So interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So I'd say just try some colostrum. Everyone gets really, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, interesting. I actually started colostrum.
Okay. You actually, there's a lot of colostrums out there. So you want to make sure on the label that they have the lactoferrin still in it, because a lot of the processed colostrum doesn't have the lactoferrin and they have to take it out, but it's the lactoferrin that's the biggest signal to our immune system. And so it's important to look for that.
Okay, very good.
So this is just a comment. So I had just had my daughter when my son was diagnosed.
Oh my gosh.
And I gave him breast milk for probably, I don't know, 4 weeks. We asked our doctor because they wanted to put like some junk in his feeding tube. And I said, this is so weird, but can I do this? And he said, yes. So now that I didn't ever know, like, we never knew what it helped, but we probably helped his gut.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
And your
Well, that's encouraging.
immune signaling at
Yeah.
the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And in fact, there's a protocol. The book is called The Immune Code. And I'll use this protocol to build up Akkermansia. It's a very specific probiotic, but that's what we're born with is Akkermansia in terms of good bacteria in our gut. And so the way to build that up is taking polyphenols, mix it with breast milk. I just say colostrum, let's forego the breast milk thing because it tastes awful, but colostrum's a little bit above that.
Yeah.
Polyphenols, the colostrum, and just the skins of apples for like 14 days. And you rebuild your Akkermansia really well.
Wow. So
Yeah, but the breast milk being a key component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
For
encouraging.
adults, yeah.
And where do you get colostrum or breast milk?
Um,
Is it really colostrum from?
Yes, and it must be collected within the first 3 hours of the baby's birth. The baby has to eat, well, the company I use, they're called Gastro Defense, and I can give you a link to it because it's one of the originals. But they go through a meticulous process to make sure the cows are happy. So there's no steroid hormone, there's no GMO, there's nothing, and that the baby gets all the milk it needs before collection from them.
So it's there.
What company is that?
It's called Gastro Defense. It used to be called Sovereign Labs, so that's why I'm stumbling because they just changed their name. But I'll give you all a link to that.
But our cows, are they organic cows, like
Yes.
pasture? Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm pretty sure that cello was playing in the background while they're.
Yeah.
I'm like, can you play music for them? To your question, is it dairy? There's no dairy in it. So this is that I always have to address this with people like, I'm really sensitive to dairy. The FDA requires them to put on the bag contains dairy because the FDA can't quite get the idea that colostrum has not turned to dairy until after the third day, right? Yeah, the third day. And so pure colostrum does not have that dairy component or peptide in it. It changes, right? So that's when the baby really stops drinking. It's just so important to get that baby that first few so that you can stand up, run around, do all that. And for us, same thing is we need it to be pure. And that's why not all companies are alike. There's a lot of colostrum out there, but they got to tell me how and when they're collecting it, because it makes a difference, especially with sick people. But I'm highly allergic to dairy, and I have it pretty much every day.
Gene Bulgari says buy dairy from, colostrum from women. Did you know that? And drink it, yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, if you can get it pure like that.
So does it come like milk? Or does
It comes in a powder form.
Liquid or powder? okay.
Yeah, and you just mix it with water, or I use coconut milk just to soften the taste a little bit. They do have a pill form, but again, if you're not digesting well, I don't want you to use a lot of energy breaking down a pill to get the product, so I usually encourage people to just do the bag of colostrum. Kids, we actually have sprays, so really young kids, we could do a spray and a nasal.
And when I was nursing, I used to take, I had a pot of milk, so I used to take the colostrum, the first couple days, freeze it all.
Yeah.
And then use it every time they were sick.
Yeah,
So we're
brilliant, yeah, absolutely.
Way
I mean, I think they should
Yeah.
teach that in hospitals with, newborns, like,
I read about
say that,
so I
say
read
that
it sometimes.
first. Because that's what turns on, by design, that's what turns on our immune
Right,
system.
exactly,
We're no longer in that safety cocoon. And that's why the vaginal birth is so important,
Yeah.
because when they have to go through that squeezing process, that's a signal that says, oh, we're going out in the world, immune system, turn on. And the colostrum then further hits that signal, so we get those immunoglobulins. We get all those barriers. When we're born, our barriers are completely open, right? But they have to be, so they can sample the world and start to adapt. So we don't want to go in and close the barriers, but we definitely want to support the sample. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that has so much to do, that's a whole nother thing with mom's microbiome.